How do you add predictive analytics to your content strategy, and why is it so important to do so right now? Today, we find out on our very first episode of the Content Marketing for the Future podcast. Amanda here, and welcome to the Content Marketing for the Future podcast. If it's your first time listening, thanks so much for coming. We publish a new episode every other week and a summary on the Atomic Reach blog. Today's special guest is the Senior Director of Product Marketing at Infer. On top of this role, his interesting Twitter bio says that he's a singer, musician, paleo chef, copywriter, die-hard Red Sox and Ravens fan, and a dog guy. Let's welcome Sean Zinsmeister.
Hey, Amanda.
Hi, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing very well.
Good. Are you ready to talk about predictive intelligence and content marketing?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Always.
Awesome. Okay. So I want to know a little bit about your role as a Senior Director of Product Marketing at Infer and a little bit about the company itself. So what was it like getting your feet wet in predictive analytics and in content marketing?
Yeah, so probably a little bit about my background to help answer that question. Before I joined the Infer team, I was actually a customer over at a company called Nitro, which is one of the leading alternatives to Adobe Acrobat, and I ran global marketing operations for them for a number of years. So I was an early customer over there. We were one of Infer's first customers, so I had a chance to be very early on with predictive analytics, and I actually had no idea. The story is I really didn't actually have any idea what it was even several years ago when it was actually the sales team that purchased the technology. And Nitro is a very unique challenge that they're solving with predictive, and the fact that they have millions and millions of hits to their website, almost 3 million plus every single month. There's a tremendous amount of volume for the size of the company because they sell worldwide, and their software is very popular. So being able to sift through, all these people who are inquiring about trials of their software was a massive problem. And the sales team kind of came by my desk one day, and they dropped this thing. The guy came by, and the sales leader looked at me. He's like, "Well, we did it." And I said, "What?" And he said, we bought Predictive." And I said, "That's great." What does that mean? And that began my journey. He said, "Oh, well, you have to figure this out." And so that's always been my instruction with anything. Same way how I got my feet wet with marketing automation and analytics and all this stuff, is that you sort of just left to your own devices to figure it out. But that was sort of my first interaction with predictive, and getting a chance to work with the Infer team early on as a customer. I really became a student about what this is about, and really began to then sort of tear down the architectures that I had built and rebuild them using predictive analytics, just understanding how much more powerful they are when you're sort of talking about infrastructure and data flow, signal flow, and things like that. So yeah, that was sort of my background. And then I've been with Infer for about a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And I saw the opportunity to really dive deep, especially into the product marketing side. And I feel like to your question about content marketing, yes. I think it's been a staple sort of with me. I sort of have a very non-traditional background, I suppose. So my background is actually in music composition and theory.
Wow.
That's what I studied in university. And then I worked as a professional sound designer and audio engineer for a number of years, which is where I was able to kind of use my technical chops in an operations role. But content creation has always sort of been, it's just been a part of my DNA. I mean, I have a performance degree, so, I'm no stranger to the stage and things like that. So I've always sort of fancied myself a pretty good communicator, and finding the mediums that work for me has always been something, regardless of the marketing role that I've had. And now, especially in a product marketing role, I think content is my product in many regards. I think that, where product managers are really looking at, what the product is and how it works, I think that product marketers' job is to really figure out how we're going to share this message with the world, and content is a really, really important part of that.
Awesome. I can totally relate to not having the traditional way of getting into the industry. I studied like fashion communications, and before that I wanted to pursue like a music studio career where I get to work in studio and edit music and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And I didn't find that a promising future in that. I'd say I'm not some prodigy or anything like that. So I was like, what am I going to do? I want something artistic, and I want something that, has a bit more profit behind, something I can get money from. And I was like, okay, maybe communications would work. And then I started graphic design, didn't like that. And then I went to social media. And that's how I started. Yeah, I got pushed into social media after finding out I didn't like graphic design. So from there, I just kind of self-taught myself. And I'm finding a lot of people saying like they didn't have the traditional business, digital marketing education, because at that time it didn't exist yet, and people had to fend for themselves and kind of dig deep into the internet of information to find out, what do I do? What is this thing?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I actually think that the best marketing minds that I've ever connected with have those squiggly backgrounds. I was exactly the same way. Actually, this mirror, almost a spit and image mirror of where I was, where when I was working as a sound designer and audio engineer, the great thing was that, I had a job that had healthcare in that industry, which is great, but I also kind of realized I wasn't going to be able to scale a studio job. And especially back in 2008, when the economy really, really went belly up during the Great Recession, a lot of the big companies, big publishing houses that we were doing business with, really pulled back their projects, and they had to, forced to make layoffs. And so I really had to do some soul searching. And like you, I sort of looked at, okay, well, I have a fairly analytical mind, but I need something that fuels my creative spirit. I don't need to do music for a living because, I'm also not a prodigy or anything like that. And I have a lot of respect for the very, very hardworking musician friends that I have that are really just out there hustling. And it just really was never a huge part of my DNA. And I felt like anything I could do to capture that in a day-to-day job, and marketing really just helped. I found it to be a great balance of those two sort of parts of my brain, which is one of the big reasons that I went into there. And I also, I began to enjoy the business aspect of it as well. I had done a lot of project management and working with clients on the studio side, and I felt like this was a great kind of hybrid of skills and something that I could add longevity to a career, which I think is always important to have something that you have at least a few rungs, upwards that you can sort of look to, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's a great way to explain exactly my mentality towards where I am today. Okay, so getting back on track. So what's it like working at Infer?
Yeah, I've never had so much fun in a job before. And I'm very genuine when I say that, and I just get very excited about this stuff. I love working with, I came to Infer, I'll back up for just a second. When I sort of thought about what I wanted to do next, there's sort of like 3 Ps that I always look at. One is the people. I wanted to go to a company where I could be the dumbest person in the room. Hands down, that's true at Infer. I just get a chance. I mean, these are from the data scientists to the data scientists and our machine learning engineers to our CEO and product people. I mean, it's just the stuff that I absorb every day. I love being a student. I love having my brain sort of go through those exercises and continue to train every single day. The second P is really the product. I wanted something that would feel very big. And the work that they're doing around artificial intelligence and predictive for sales and marketing, I felt like this was a product that, first of all, had a very, very strong reputation in the market. I had hands-on experience about how good it was too, so I knew sort of firsthand. And it was something that I felt like I could tell a very broad story around. So, again, tying it back to content marketing, I wanted to make sure that I didn't get siloed because, as much as I loved the last job, there was only so much that I could do around, PDF and document productivity. And I think that there is a big idea there. It just wasn't resonating for me and getting me really, really excited. So, yeah, I mean, I guess I said 3 Ps, but I guess people, product, and then I guess it's really 2, because those are really the 2 things that really meant the most for me. And I guess the third P is place. I actually was looking for a way to get out of working in San Francisco. So that third P for me was actually getting a chance to work in Mountain View and having a whole different environment, a different set of people. I love San Francisco. I loved working in downtown San Francisco, but I was really chomping at the bit to find a whole new network and tap into a new pool of minds. And there are a lot of folks who are down the peninsula is the expression that we use here that are sort of down south from San Francisco that I wanted to get a chance to learn from and share ideas from and things like that. So that's really what it's been like. And it's amazing to work for. I mean, this is like a PMM's dream job. The company is very largely research and development, and so they ship a lot of products, and they have a lot of happy customers, which means, Amanda, I have a lot of great stories to tell. Which is just a big part of the fun. And at any time that you can just get your storytelling engine rolling with very little effort, very little force, it really is. It's just been a great fit.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that you wanted to go outside of your office and to meet more people and get those stories. And from these stories and branching out, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. One, predictive analytics, artificial intelligence, these are still fairly new technologies, right? Like if we were to draw the sort of traditional bell curve in a product lifecycle, we have indeed crossed the chasm, but it's still very early. Like we're not exactly mainstream quite yet. So the first challenge is education and trust and building trust around this. I think the exciting thing about working in high tech is there is a lot of great innovation, but there's also a lot of great storytelling that leads to vaporware, things that aren't really there, things that spark the imagination, but are not actually products that are showing value. The marketing tends to be sometimes years ahead of what actually is being sold. So I think building credibility and building trust is probably challenge number one. Number two is really, it's a very competitive landscape. And so there's a lot of noise, especially in the predictive sales and marketing industry. It's very much a fast following type of atmosphere. A lot of copycat brands that are coming out. And so the challenge of, as the product is iterating and you're continuing to, build new functionality and things like that, your messaging must also iterate along with it and finding those new angles to evolve the brand rather than having it be reactive. Let me give you an example. So Dreamforce was obviously a big, the circus came to town a few weeks ago, as I say, as 180,000 people descended on Moscone. And Dreamforce's big message is really around, artificial intelligence and blah, blah. And it's great for the space. It's exciting to see a big player like Salesforce endorsing that market. Mm-hmm. But what you see is a lot of trend jacking that comes from that as well. Now, the amount of new AI companies that are like, oh yeah, we're artificial intelligence. I'm like, what? Yesterday you totally weren't, and now you are all of a sudden. And that's hilarious. And while I do think as good marketers, you want to be able to, grab your surfboard and ride the wave as elegantly as you can without forcing the message. And so that's been another challenge too, which is you want to stay true to your core without falling behind. But if you get too far ahead, it's going to look really forced, really disingenuous, and people are not going to believe you. And so I think that's been a really another fun part of the puzzle to figure out for sure.
So with that challenge of, riding the trend, what are some tactics that you have for making sure you stand out? Because everyone does start sounding the same. We came from the content marketing world conference and apparently everyone sounded the same. So how do you stand out?
Yeah. And that, how are we different? How do you stand out is something that we are constantly focusing on. And I'll tell you what, one of the best things I feel like we can do to do that is using the voice of the customer. And customer stories are probably the number one sort of tool that I use to add signal to the noise and really break through the clutter. And I'll tell you why too, because it gets back to that first challenge that I talked about how do you build credibility? Well, the truth is that like if it's just vendor on vendor, it's going to be like your word against somebody else's. And, yes, there are people who are better at selling and better at pitching than others. But the truth is that you want to be able to talk to the practitioners, take it to the street. What's really happening? How is this stuff really being used? And then, of course, what are the actual tangible metrics that you can show? What does success look like? And if I did nothing but customer marketing in my role, I think that's probably I would be able to add a lot of value to that. It's also the easiest way, for people to understand this stuff. They look at data science and predictive analytics, machine learning, AI, and all this stuff. It feels very complicated, and it feels like everybody needs a PhD to really sort of get their head around it. Mm-hmm. And the truth is that telling that story through use cases, through proven use cases, sort of real customers, who are using real products, showing real success, has been a winning formula for Infer. And I think that's one of the reasons that we've been able to build the largest customer community in the predictive sales and marketing space. And by far, we have the most documented and proven use cases. And we're finding new ones every single day, right? Where our customers are helping us innovate on messaging and innovate on use cases and also add their own intelligence and touch to the product. So I'd say that's probably the number one tool that you can really use. And I think that the second real piece about like how do you stand out, I do think branding in this case is important. I think we were very lucky that we had very forward-thinking co-founders and technical co-founders that really thought about the brand and thought about something that was going to stick out. I was very lucky that we were, that Infer was. That is another reason that I really loved joining this company. Is I thought Infer was what a great brand to have something involved in predictive analytics, where it can almost become a pun on itself. And I think that the final thing is Infer is a very product centric company. And, I talked about, the sort of Dreamforce example and marketing being ahead of the actual product. We've been fairly conservative to make sure that we are putting real product out into the market that's showing real success with real customers, to get back to that sort of, three-part formula. Mm-hmm. And because we have so much of our company dedicated to research and development, having a product that performs really, really, really well is very important, especially when you're introducing something new to an industry. You want to make sure that you're not losing credibility as you introduce new things, and I'd say that's probably another part of the formula about how we stick out. Is really we're focused on product. We're very, very focused on product. Almost maybe to a fault sometimes, but I would say that's kind of another part about how we're making sure we break through all the noise.
I think that's really great, though, because from working at a startup, sometimes you have to compromise some things in order to get to another goal, to do something else, because there's not enough manpower to manage everything. So product first, I think, is the best, because you have to have something to sell, and you can't sell something that's garbage,
Yep. and to be honest, salespeople love having something. It makes it so much easier to sell when you have, a very strong product base. And that's important as you build your sales team, as well as getting more people on board who are also excited to sell this stuff too. Mm-hmm. Just another important way, as you're saying, like of just sort of building your company.
Mm-hmm. So for those new to the idea of adding intelligent models to their content marketing strategies, what is predictive analytics, and in what ways can it be applied to content marketing?
Yeah, very good question, and a very timely one as well. I had a chance to present at the content marketing meetup in Silicon Valley just the other evening, and we were talking very much about this exact subject. To lay the groundwork, the way that I like to think about predictive analytics is to really zoom out for a second and understand that, like, computers may not be able to think like humans. But what they can do is remember more data and process it faster than any person without mistakes. And I have memorized that because I think it's really important to understand. And like what we are doing is building that intelligence layer for sales and marketing. When we started out 6 years ago was really building predictive scoring models to cannibalize and replace the traditional gut-based, flawed, points-based, rule-based, manual-based, minutes-based, call it whatever you want, types of models that became very untrusted, that were first introduced by the early marketing automation vendors. Mm-hmm. And for more of the sort of more specific definition around predictive analytics, it's a brand of advanced analytics that's really used to make predictions about unknown future events, right? So you're gathering all this data and techniques of data mining and statistics, predictive modeling, machine learning, to analyze current and also third-party data sets. So we use external signals as well as third-party providers to determine a likely outcome. And where this really applies to content marketing is in a few ways. So with content marketing, it's like we have all this great content that we're pushing out there. Some of it's for lead gen. We're pushing an ebook out there is a great example. And we're getting a lot of people to download this ebook as a first introduction. And as marketers, we understand that, the downloading of an ebook is not showing a strong intent as, say, requesting a quote or requesting pricing. That's a very obvious dichotomy. We don't even need to build a predictive model to tell us that. But the truth is that as we have, can build up this very large supply of prospects and a very large inbound lead flow, we need a way to sort of separate the wheat from the chaff. Like, we need to be able to find the best leads. And so being able to tackle that problem of, hey, I have too many prospects, too many people downloading my ebook, are we answering the question, are we reaching the right buyers? Mm-hmm. It's not that are we reaching the right people. And this is something that I really talk about, where it's like, we're so used to, as content marketers, looking at downstream metrics, how many downloads. And you could look at 3 ebooks on your, dashboard or whatever and say, oh, well, this one got 300, this one got 150, and this one got 230. Well, the 300 one is clearly the most popular content. Like, we should try to do more about that. And the reason that I interject myself there is because this is all about predictive analytics. If you take nothing else away, especially as a content marketer, it's about optimizing your decision making. How are we making smarter decisions? And by smarter decisions, we're talking about how are we reaching more people with a more personalized message, a more relevant message, who are more likely to buy our product. And if we continue down this little example, we might use a predictive model to take that ebook that was downloaded 300 times and find out that only 5% were good leads, leads that looked like our buyer, that looked like a good fit to buy our product. When you actually might uncover that the ebook that was downloaded a little bit less, so the 150 actually had, 30%. And where that decision making then comes in for me is, okay, well, what was in that content that made it more popular? How do we then take that content, build other pieces from that ebook? Maybe we do a video, an infographic, etc., to amplify that message and reach more of those like buyers. And that's just a very simple example to see how you can have a more focused content marketing strategy using predictive analytics. Because the last piece that I always like to tell content marketers in particular about is opportunity cost is everything. Amanda, the fear of working on the wrong thing, spending energy on the wrong thing, because content is a craft and it should take time to build that quality in your content and in what you're saying. And if you're not 100% sure if it's something that's going to resonate with your audience, it could be a very big risk in terms of creating the wrong message that's not going to be a good fit for your audience. And I think that what people really should be after from data, and I think where data has been confusing, is it's difficult sometimes to look at data sets and understand what are the patterns here, and okay, now that I know this, what do I do next? And answering those 2 questions is really at the core of predictive analytics. It's helping you find those patterns in historical and behavioral data to help you identify opportunities and risks. But it also is just like helping you understand, okay, what do you do next? And here's where we can help your decision making along. It's not a silver bullet, right? Like there is no one answer to this, but you certainly can increase the confidence and the sound judgment that you're making behind the decisions, especially within marketing and sales.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us a real life situation where predictive analytics has really paid off for your customers?
Yeah, there's a few that actually come to mind. So I'll share with you some quick hits of some of my favorites. One is a new one from a customer that's been with us actually for 3 years now, or a few years now. A company called ShoreTel. They sell a lot of phone systems and hardware. I like this story because it's a great way to sort of wrap your head around the productivity gains, because the two byproducts of using predictive analytics is, I want to, increase my sales productivity and make my marketing more effective. And so before predictive analytics, ShoreTel was really looking at, it would take frontline reps about 100 calls to generate one marketing qualified lead. 100 calls for one marketing qualified lead. So they had to really spread themselves thin to really dial through a lot of those. Once they added predictive analytics, they realized that the A leads actually were converting at 50%, which was huge. And so they went down from 100 calls for one MQL to 12. And that's a massive productivity gain. I mean, that's far less. I mean, that's essentially saying that a rep had to really work like 2 leads to generate an MQL. And that, just being able to see the call volume drop in such, almost by 88%, that's massive productivity gains. That means that reps can then focus more on buyers who are actually more likely to buy from them, which will lead to higher conversion rates, revenue increases. But the other brilliant thing there too is that they were realizing that the A leads, the good leads that our predictive model was able to identify for them was actually 4.3x higher in average contract value. And so you were getting more bang for your buck, if you will. Like they were focusing on prospects that were more valuable than the baseline. So that's one example that I really like as a way to sort of visualize the types of effects you can have. My other favorite company is out of Washington, D.C., one of a very fast-growing startup company there called Social Tables. They also had a very large volume of leads and were sort of drowning in leads so that they just couldn't follow up with a lot of them. They actually used both predictive analytics and then what we call profiling, which was allowing them to actually hyper-segment and get a little bit more personalized with the trials that were coming through, so they could supply more relevant content because they knew so much more about them, right? It's about getting to that one-to-one relationship. And through that, they were able to grow their revenue. They actually monthly revenue increased about $500,000 per month, which is a massive returns because of how they were applying this predictive model. It's a great case study that we have on our website for people who want to dive in. But it also led to overall revenue gains of about 10% month over month. And so you can see as you start to use this stuff to optimize what you're doing in your business, you can see that the downstream metrics, as well as what you're doing at the top of the funnel, can be massive for your business.
Definitely. So, like on top of these stories that you have, what questions do you usually hear from your customers?
Yeah, so there's definitely it always depends for sure, but the main problems that people come to us looking to solve, I kind of boil them down into almost 4 kind of really easy to understand ones, which is, one, I have too many prospects. Which are the best fit to buy? And that's like a champagne problem, right? Like
We have that too, yeah.
we have too many leads. Like that's great. It's a great problem sometimes to have, but it can be very detrimental to your business. So too many prospects. The other one is I have too few prospects. How do I find more prospects, net new prospects, that look like my best customer? There's something called a net new model, a lookalike model, that you can build to go out and acquire. And that's really useful for like outbound sales programs or account-based marketing programs, things like that. Especially if you don't have like the luxury of some of those of that lead flow. That's another challenge that businesses are looking to solve. What opportunities am I missing? Which prospects are most engaged? This gets into the really exciting world of engagement and behavior modeling. How are people engaging with my content? What is the buying propensity of that engagement? And there's a timing aspect there too. So while the first two, too many prospects, too few prospects, it's really about like, do you look like a buyer? Are you a good fit for my business? This is actually answering the question, do you act like a buyer? When is the best time for me to engage? And that's really what you're looking at there. And then the final one is really about unclear segmentation, the unsexy story of segmentation, the number one forgotten hero of the marketing
Slowly
world.
getting lost. Yep.
Yes, totally getting lost. But we have to go back to our marketing 101 class and relearn this because it's so important. But I have to admit that I see more and more companies bungle this part more than anything else. And it's answering the question, Amanda, who is my ideal customer profile? Or the ICP is the popular acronym has become. And where that's important is it's all around the idea of personalization. And that's something that's got to be hugely important for content marketers. It's not just looking at the personas, it's looking about like who do we need to be tailoring this message to? And that means like, from our website copy to the types of visuals that we're using on our website or on our ebooks or on our videos or on our social media channels. There's a lot of implications to how your message can get affected there. And so I'd say that, that's another big challenge that a lot of businesses come to using predictive analytics to answer those questions.
Mm-hmm. So with the stories and the questions that you get asked, what are some of the surprising outcomes that have happened when customers start using a predictive model in their content strategy?
Yeah, so there's definitely a couple of things that happen. One is it's not uncommon for businesses to bubble up signals that they didn't know were relevant to their business. Like, for example, it's like we might be able to say to a business that like, hey, did you guys know that you actually sell really well into prospects that are between this employee size and this amount of revenue per year who also use these types of technologies? Like, did you know you sold really well into businesses that use Amazon Web Services, just as an example. Now, those, what I call technographic signals, technographic being like this is the type of technologies that they're using, most of which you can crawl from the web. It's not always going to be something that you want to personalize to your message. It's like if you don't sell a product relevant to Amazon Web Services, well, then that signal is very useful in segmentation and targeting exercise, but it's not like you're going to, go out and create a piece of content to that if you sell video chat or something. I don't know, something that's not related to IT or infrastructure or something. But and many times you can personalize it to that as well. Where if you sold a particular type of product that was a good fit for certain CRMs or certain sort of marketing automation platforms, maybe there's a way that you can tailor your message to be more relevant. And so I think that's one thing that I think is exciting when people start to look at that. I think the other big surprising thing is businesses don't really understand how inefficient they're being today. And so like if you look at like a model when we build it, when we show them like, hey, did you know that you're spending like X amount of effort on leads that are just never going to convert? And by never, like we really mean like the 0.1%.
Yeah, that's hard to take in. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to take in, but this is where like the magic kind of happens, if I can call it that, where like you have this dead weight loss that you can then shift that effort. So we have a little phrase that we like to align effort to impact.
Great phrase.
Yeah, so and I like to also use that in addition to a baseball analogy, which is you want to make sure that reps are swinging at strikes, and you want to make sure that you can increase their batting average. So get them a chance to at least get a hit. And so when you align that effort to impact, you're essentially saying like take, all that time you were wasting on bad leads, like let's shift that effort into where you're most likely to win. And what's cool and how it relates to a content marketing standpoint is because content is able to pour a lot more leads into the top of the funnel, it almost becomes sort of lead agnostic in terms of source, and you're more looking at like what are the good leads, and so you have more strength in that sales and marketing alignment because you have those objective definitions of prospects being poured in from your marketing team. So I think that's sort of another nice byproduct of businesses who have made that journey into predictive.
That's great. It's good to see more and more businesses kind of looking into using tools that can help them, like intelligent tools to help them grow. So with that, do you think more people are now welcoming the idea of adding intelligence to their content strategies, or do you think it's still a high uphill battle?
I think that I think that the trend is heading upwards. I really do. I think that the first people in line to really start to adopt this, if we had to break it down by persona, which I think might be an interesting way to answer this
Definitely,
question.
yeah.
I think that the technical buyers are always going to be the first online for this because, like, and by that I mean like marketing operations and sales operations people who live in the stack day in and day out, focused on data flow, who are really like, they're more plumbers these days, trying to figure out like how to make this stuff flow. And predictive analytics is definitely a way to make those systems more efficient. I think the next phase is, the actual users of this. I think the primary users, especially in the early stages of the technology, frontline reps and figuring out how we make their lives easier. How do you increase ramp time? How do you increase their batting average, to use that analogy again? How do you increase their win rate? Marketers are then fast followers, because I think that one problem that we've seen with sales and marketing technology is the last thing that sales wants is another thing
Yep.
for marketing to just throw over the fence and be like, oh, do it. And it's like, it's never going to work. So the more that this is driven by your sales organization, that's going to be more meaningful. And that tends to be the way we like to sell into organizations, is you want to make sure that sales has a seat at the table. And from that, I think that, when we talk about marketing coming in kind of that third place, I also now start to see campaigns, field marketing, and content marketing people start to adopt these tools as well. So it's a slow trend, but I think it's really just about education. I think it's about having more of these types of stories that people can latch onto about how they can use this stuff. I just don't think that there are enough of these types of realistic use cases that are being shared right now. I think that it will start. I mean, when I mentioned that I had a chance to present to the content marketing meetup the other evening, and just being able to just share some of the stories, tactics that our customers are doing, you can start to see like the light bulbs go off in the room. And hopefully people, it's just going to take more of that. It's going to take more of that education for people to have those ideas be sparked and bring them back into their organizations and how they can apply to their content strategies.
So to kind of change the mood a little bit, to get a little cheesy here, as we look to the future of content marketing, what do you think is the key to success?
Well, this is definitely, we're entering the Sean Zinsmeister opinion zone, I think, on this one. I do think that we are going to see an evolution in the role of the content marketing person, content marketing professional. I think that when content marketing first became a thing, we were almost looking at this, American Idol style marketing, which was all about entertainment and it's got to be fun and bring people in. And the problem is that while the trick gets the click, as the expression goes,
Right.
I don't really think people realize how unvaluable that stuff is. And I think that as you add those layers of intelligence, we start to see how crummy those clicks actually are, and how, you may be able to get a lot of people's attention, but these people are never going to buy from you. They're just never going to be into it. And so you're almost like, you're casting your net really, really far. And I know that there's a lot of branding aspects from that, and things like that. But I do think we're starting to see an evolution of that role, especially as, I think content, social media, I think those are the same roles in organizations. Like, I think that as you've seen the evolution in social media where, organic reach is really, really harder to come by, I think that those roles are going to merge, because in many organizations, especially for startups, social media is just like not a full-time job. It's important to have a presence there, but and it's an important channel for us to get our content out there, but like it's also something that needs to be like a part of your content marketing manager or whoever that role is, rather than like having somebody dedicated to it. I think that the final part of it is I would love to see content tied and come more from, now there's a very selfish reason for this, but come from the product marketing role. I think a huge problem that I see with certain content marketing strategies out there is there's a massive disconnect from your product. And by that, I mean, it's like, you don't need to be hawking product all the time. You don't need to be selling product. Don't need to be pitching all the time. It's not about that. But there's a lot of just bizarre strategies that I see that just have nothing to do with the core competency. And I get it. It's supposed to be fun and attract attention, but it's like, yeah, but at some point, like, you want to have standing. You want to show expertise. You want to solve market problems. And I think that that's got to be the core where you're working with your product marketing team to inform that, because otherwise, in those like amplification channels that you're using, you start to see these just massive disconnects. And I think that that's another part where I do think that you're going to see a rise in product marketing managers and organizations. I hope that that's a change in the discipline and not just a change in job title. But I think that that's just another piece where, better training, better discipline, more expertise, more thoughtfulness going into the content. And I think part of that just derives from, how product-centric an organization is and things like that. So I'd say that that's hopefully where I see the trends kind of going with the content marketing role.
I totally agree with that, actually. Like, we kind of recently started thinking in that way when it comes to approaching our own content marketing strategy. We needed to bridge the gap between our highly technical platform, that uses machine learning, and try to market that. And you're like, how much information can we provide our audience before they just get lost, before they're just like, I don't get it, bye. And I have had to sit down with our client experience person to ask him, because he also does product development. He just doesn't sell it. He's just very technically minded. So I'm finding it very hard, or not hard, but I'm finding it a challenge to kind of put his terminology, write that in a blog post, and have it so that people understand, really break it down. And I really feel those stories that you were talking about really helps in giving real life examples.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's another challenge that I think you very neatly illustrated, which is sometimes the products that we sell are very, very technical. And I think that is also going to be the makings of a really good content marketing person, which is how do you pull out the things that are important so you don't completely dilute it? Because some of this stuff is complicated, so it adds credibility to it, and you don't want to take away from the engineering behind it. I think that's terrible when we sort of, put cotton candy on our messaging, which really dilutes sort of the great engineering behind some of these products. But you want to make it digestible too. You want to make it snackable, as I like to say. How do you put it into bite sizes that people can break off? Like, maybe it's how you break up that message and the sheer sort of density of it, but also, like you said, like finding the right messaging language to really tell that story, so people are like, hey, I don't need a degree in X to really understand this, but I totally understand the practical use. I can actually talk to people outside of our office about this and have some credibility.
So to end things on a bit of a fun note, you talked about cotton candy there. So are you guys doing anything for Halloween, or what's coming up for the Infor team?
So I think that we are going to have our annual Halloween contest on Monday. And I think that each department is going to have the theme is groups of 3, and so I think we'll be seeing a lot of interesting costumes come from that. So I'm pretty excited, but no, it's been a big year, and I'm looking forward to sort of ending things on a really high note and heading into the holidays to connect with family and sort of take a little bit of a breather before we start the 2017.
For sure.
Sprint again.
Yeah, I virtually worked all year until the first 2 weeks of October this year, because I had a trip for Japan. And I needed that break, and I'm excited for the holidays to come too, because I didn't get to see my family for Thanksgiving, right? Because it's at the same time for us in Canada. And so I think, we're gonna end on a high note and hopefully start 2017 even higher.
Excellent.
Okay, well, that's all the questions I had. Sean, thank you so much for sitting down with us. You've definitely provided a ton of tips and tales to learn from. It's really been a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
We hope you guys enjoyed learning about predictive analytics and content marketing. Thanks so much for tuning in for this episode of the Content Marketing for the Future podcast. Make sure you subscribe and let us know your thoughts over on Twitter at atomic_reach. or leave us a comment on Soundcloud or in iTunes. For updates from Sean, follow him on Twitter at @Zinsmeister or at Infor Inc. You can also reach out to me personally at Amanda_Auror. That's MANDA_AUROR. Special thanks to our audio guy Suhash, who also doubles as our business developer. Until next time, this has been Amanda from Atomic Reach.